phone calls for inmates that we're not prioritizing updating our legislation for their victims.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It just doesn't make sense. What do you think that some of those people that are inmates have been there because of the violence?
No, those people do.
Yeah, well,
Let's include you.
It's just, I don't know, it's frustrating. And I'm new to the office. There's nothing that I can say to tell you guys.
good. Good. Thanks for the text today. Yeah.
Survivor. Are you ready?
They said these two seats were open. Yeah.
Hey, Senator.
What's going on?
How are you?
Good.
You want to be your face here?
Yeah, I see that.
Matt can come have a seat. if you
Yeah,
want.
Matt, you want to come sit?
Yeah. Judy and Lauren.
No, we're there.
Okay. Do they want to sit? No. Okay.
They can if they want. It doesn't matter.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for coming here to the State House once again. We are all aware, and I'm joined by our colleagues in the legislature, Senator Patrick, Representative Sullivan, and Representative Muratori.
Senator O'Connor.
Senator, did I just say Senator
Patrick.
Patrick. Senator Patrick O'Connor. They call you Patrick, right? And they are well aware, as well as their colleagues, that there was recent action taken relative to the bill that we filed to address dangerousness and other matters. And that decision of the Judiciary Committee involved the sending of the bill to a study. And we heard from you once again, and you on behalf of many people in our Commonwealth who have been victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, child victims of rape and sexual abuse. And you have given all of us so much with your experiences being told. You've lived through tragic circumstances, but you've had the courage and the will to come forward and publicly share your stories. And that has done a lot, not only for you, but also for those many voices that have been silent, the many voices of people who have not engaged themselves in a process for a myriad of reasons. But the one thing that has brought us together is the common and shared purpose of trying to make the laws better in this Commonwealth for victims much like yourselves. We recognized that back in 2017 with the Brangen decision and reforms of the bail statute, that there were significant gaps that remained in our laws. And so in 2018, we filed a bill to address some of these deficiencies. We filed the bill again in 2019, and we filed the bill again in 2021. 3 times we have filed this bill. And we want to thank you for once again coming forward to tell the story, to help put the color on what is needed in order to effectuate these changes. I also want to highlight the fact that through you and your voices, you've given a sense or a public view of what victims look like. And in this area, there is no boundary relative to race and ethnicity. These crimes impact people of all different backgrounds, men, women, children, and there is no boundary to that. And I want to thank you for coming forward to telling the story. There are a few days left of this legislative session, and I believe having you here today, thank you, Senator Tarr, for coming forward, is really important for us to say thank you to you, but also to just underscore how important you being a part of this process has meant to us and has meant to many members of the legislature and to the safety and well-being of the many voices that have not been heard in this Commonwealth.
Thanks, Lieutenant Governor. I just want to start, first of all, by echoing her perspective that it's not over till it's over, because it's not. And the fact that several of you reached out to us after the committee moved this legislation to a study and said that you really wanted to have a chance to speak to that was, for us anyway, a gift. And the reason I call it a gift is, if I've learned anything over the course of the last several years as we've been talking to survivors and to organizations who work with those who are dealing with these issues of abuse and assault and trafficking in some cases, it's been the difficulty, for a whole bunch of reasons, that people have felt about coming forward and speaking out. And I do believe with all my heart that this issue is far more prevalent across this Commonwealth than people understand. And the reason for that, it is so difficult for people who are trapped in these circumstances to come forward and speak. In many cases, the folks who are victims and survivors here know the perpetrator and the person and the families, in many cases, of those who have assaulted them. In many cases, they know them well. I mean, Representative Sullivan's case is a great example of that. And that common link to this makes it very hard for people to come forward, because you know when you come forward, everybody who's close to the person who's been abusing you is going to come down on you and come down on you hard. And the part that makes me most concerned about that is that the state has not been there to look after you and to incorporate your concerns and your issues into its own policymaking and statutory framework. And a big part of what we are seeking to achieve here is to make it possible for you to believe that the state is on your side. I can't tell you how many times we went through these discussions and conversations, both the ones you've been brave enough to do publicly and also many of the conversations we've had privately, where the victims, the survivors, have said, I just never felt like the state was on my side. I honestly can't believe how difficult that must be for you, how hard that must make this seem, and how unfair and unjust that must make all this seem to you. And our work, your work, and especially your willingness to continue to speak on behalf of so many others is a big part of what this is all about. The state should be on your side. The state should understand its role in keeping you safe and protected. And I'll tell you something, when I was at one of these events and one of the people who spoke talked about how when she went to work after she'd been assaulted and had filed charges against the man who assaulted her, when she went to work and asked her boss, where are the security cameras in the parking lot? And her boss said, well, what do you want to know that for? And she said, because I want to know I can park somewhere where if he comes and takes me, when I either show up for work or when I'm leaving at the end of the day, it will be caught on video and you folks will know that it happened and have the ability to try to use that to find me. No one should ever have to go to work every day worrying about whether or not they're parking in front of the security cameras. But that is the fact, that is the truth that so many victims under the current statutes deal with every single day. And that's why we're so grateful for your willingness to come forward and speak again here in the State House, a building that probably doesn't feel like it's been that friendly to you. And we're just honored to have you with us. So with that, I will turn it over to you, and you can choose to speak in whichever order you're most comfortable with. Who wants to go first? Go for it.
I will if no one else. Okay. Governor Baker, in your administration, I cannot thank you enough for advocating for us and for your efforts and passion to make much-needed changes in Massachusetts for victims. Thank you for giving us hope, for giving me a voice, and for the opportunity to advocate for your Dangerousness bill. I know if this legislation had been in place for me, my life and my children's lives would have been different. I know this legislation would have helped so many victims. Advocating and ultimately changing the laws would have helped me accept that my abusive relationship with my abuser and the Hingham court system would have at least happened for a reason. I believed that by sharing my horrible experiences, I would prevent others from going through the same. Like many life experiences, I don't know if we really understand what it's like to be in someone else's shoes. So I gladly participated in the Roundtable events with this in mind. I allowed myself to be vulnerable. I risked my safety, and by retelling my story, I found myself reliving my abuse and having many emotional days. I had hoped by opening myself up this way, I would help the Judiciary Committee see what it was like to be a victim of abuse in the court system. Unfortunately, they did not hear me. Or did they? I don't know. I now wonder if they actually listened to any of us. Believing the co-chairs and the committee just did not listen is less hurtful for me and less evil, I suppose. Because if they did hear us and they listened to all the Roundtable events and they heard our gut-wrenching stories of children being abused, women raped, stabbed, beaten by intimate partners, then I have to believe I spoke to cold, callous people who have no empathy. Or care for the well-being of our children or the thousands of victims who are abused. The action of the Judiciary Committee is shameful, it's insulting, and it's disrespectful to all of us. I am now asking myself, how do human beings who have the power to help prevent children from sexual abuse and victims from assault not support this legislation? I know firsthand what it feels like to be hit, to be spit on, to be threatened by a man I called my fiancé. I know what it feels like to beg and beg for protection and yet have my abuser go unpunished when he cut off his GPS. I know what it feels like to feel the guilt and pain of allowing this monster into my children's lives. Unfortunately now, I know, as we all do, firsthand, what it feels like to have lawmakers who do not care about victims and who do not want to support ending domestic violence. To the families of the murdered victims, to my fellow survivors, and to the victims who sit in silence, I am very sorry I failed you. When I was told the Judiciary Committee killed this legislation and put it to study, I assure you that I felt like I was punched in the face. To say I am truly insulted and disappointed, as well as that I fear our future with this group of lawmakers, is an understatement. All weekend, I felt as I did when I stood in Hingham Court, and I was harassed by my abuser's attorney when he said to me, "Your Honor, My client only open-hand slapped her across the face. I had to listen with no voice of how the system was not going to hold him accountable for the pain and the hurt he caused my children and myself. Well, something happened that day. It lit a fire in me to not allow the abusive court system or my abuser to continue to get to me. I assure you, the same feeling of desire to continue to advocate for our cause is a result of me being punched in the face by the Judiciary Committee. They have disrespected all of us. The message received from the committee: our lives do not matter. You, the committee, do not want to protect children from sexual abuse. You will continue to give abusers chance after chance after chance to reoffend. You, the committee, condones cutting off GPS devices. I will hold members accountable in my heart for children and victims abused who could have been protected. The Judiciary Committee has a power to support and pass the dangerous bill, but instead you will stand by and protect dangerous abusers and watch victims continue to get hurt and raped and children raped and abused. What more do we need to hear to raise our voices and stand stronger together? Thank you to all the senators and the reps who did support us. My hope now is that we all stay safe and protect ourselves because our lawmakers have chosen not to. Please, let's stay strong together and continue to advocate together. Thank you.
You okay?
I'm fine.
Okay.
Thank you for asking. I guess I'll go next.
Pull that up just a little bit, a little
Sure.
closer. Thanks.
My tears are listening to a fellow survivor's story and disappointment and knowing the strength that she had to come forward to begin with, the advocacy that she's done over the previous months. It just breaks my heart, yet I'm so proud to be part of this really special group of survivors. My name is Danielle Sicard. I'm a mother of 4. I work in local government as a town clerk, as I had mentioned to you in a different roundtable, and I'm also a survivor of domestic violence. In the beginning of June, I did participate in a roundtable discussion that was held in Dartmouth, and at the end of June, I spent an entire day here at the State House sharing my story with many senators and representatives in anticipation that the governor's dangerous bill would be reported out and have the opportunity for a vote. It was with great disappointment and sadness that I learned that this bill has been sent to study. It was my hope that at a minimum, the legislature would have embraced making changes that would close the unintentional loopholes in our criminal justice system. Changes such as making it a felony to cut off a GPS system, adding crimes against children as qualifying offenses for a dangerousness hearing, child pornography, enticing children under the age of 16, prostituting minors, sexual offenses, trafficking. How is it that they're not already on there is mind-boggling. This legislation would have also kept defendants that have already been declared dangerous to be detained until the disposition of their case, something that would have provided victims like myself with rights to safety while still allowing the defendants the ability to their due process. This is extremely disappointing. This bill never got a vote. Telling your story of victimization is hard and it's traumatic. I have proudly turned the worst day of my life into something that I think is useful, that is positive, and for the past several years I've held the position as a survivor member of the Victim Witness Assistance Board. I know each victim here speaks for thousands of victims in our Commonwealth who share similar experiences with these injustices in the criminal court system under the current laws. I'm proud of all of us for being able to have that voice for all of those who yet haven't found their voice. I want to thank both Governor and Lieutenant Governor for involving victims along the process of advocating for this bill. Victims' voices are important and they really do need to be heard. Thank you for giving us a voice, even if it was not heard, to make the critical and necessary changes that were proposed in this bill. It seems like it should go without saying, but victims need to be continued to be involved in this legislative process. Similar to the Secretary of the Commonwealth being asked to weigh in on potential changes to election laws, victims and the leadership of MOVA should be invited to share their stories and provide insight on the impact of any proposed legislation moving forward that impacts victims. Again, I want to thank you for the time here today, and I'm so proud of sitting with the rest of these victims. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Me?
Sure.
Okay.
You may have to move the mic.
Hello? I'll try to talk a little louder this time. I didn't write a new statement or anything, but I would like to read my statement from the last roundtable I was at, and plus a few other little points that I would like to make. I would also like to thank all of these people here today, and I know it's really difficult, and but I do believe it can be healing, especially if we get the outcome we'd like. It would be really nice. My name is Kelsey. I am 32 years old, and I am very disappointed that they have decided to put this to study. I don't think that's right. I am a survivor of childhood rape and sexual abuse, and I strongly believe that we adults must do anything and everything we possibly can to protect children from sexual predators. In my case, the abuser was my much older brother's best friend. He was estranged from his family, and we took him in. Our family loved him like a family member. He was a trusted caretaker of me. He fooled us all. He first groomed my parents, then he groomed me. He gave me gifts, was nice to me, took me places. He abused me at home and in public places like parks. He was never mean or violent towards me. He began sexually abusing me nearly every day starting at age 5, and it went on for years until I was 13. It was very confusing to me. How could someone so nice to me and seem to care about me have hurt me so badly? I still have trouble figuring it all out. But what I learned from my experience is that child predators do not need to use violence or weapons to be successful in raping and sexually abusing children. The age difference and the trusted role an offender plays in a victim's life is power enough. Maybe if my abuser had been violent towards me, it would have made more sense. When the abuse first came to light, I was very fragile. We were all scared of what was going to happen. I thought he would go to jail right away and I would be safe, but that did not happen. Fearing for my emotional and physical well-being, my parents did not go forward with the case. However, I was so traumatized by the harm perpetrated upon me by the abuser that I ended up psychiatrically hospitalized many times, especially after suicide attempts. I lost out on all my teen years, which greatly affected my adult life, still does. Years later, when I turned 18, went to the police station by myself and gave my statement. However, the crimes he was charged with were not covered by the Dangerousness bill. He was reconnected with his family at that time, and they helped him post the really low bail the judge set, a bail the prosecutor could not appeal. It was terrifying that he was out and free while the case was pending. Because of the continued struggles I faced with my mental health, I agreed to a plea. His sentence did not feel like justice at all, especially because he was released early for good behavior. So he got a slap on the wrist for ruining my life. I really feel I was given a life sentence. My life has been plagued by a vicious cycle of anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts. I spent more time in locked mental health facilities than he did in prison. I press charges mainly for two reasons: to hold him accountable, but more importantly, so no other child could be hurt by him. And as far as dangerousness goes, just because there isn't someone isn't outwardly violent doesn't mean they are not dangerous. My abuser is the type of person you'd never suspect of something so horrendous. But when it comes to child victims, I lost my place. The offender does not need to be violent because of the power dynamic between child and adult. When I was really young, I remember my abuser telling me not to say anything or we'd both get in trouble. To a 5-year-old, that could be all it takes. That's all it took in my situation. No child wants to get in trouble. A pedophile could completely destroy a child's entire life without ever being violent. But those type of people are still dangerous. In my opinion, more dangerous, because there's no outward signs of violence. They're the people who can fool you. I continue to struggle to this very day. I know the pain, shame, guilt, and the never-ending cycle of anxiety and depression that is left in the wake of sexual abuse. I really never had a chance to succeed in life. I never want another child to suffer the way I have. I would like to thank you all for hosting this again in hopes to get this passed, or at least towards a vote. And again, I'd like to thank all of the survivors here. Survivors, not victims. I want to say that too many recent decisions have been made in favor of pedophiles. It's time we correct the path we take when it comes to child sex offenders and other things as well, which other people have spoke to before or will. I can't let the pain I've faced and dealt with be for nothing. And I really couldn't live with myself if I found out my abuser abused another child. I really don't think I could live with myself. But really, I have been re-victimized by this justice system too many times. I just really hope that the people who could vote on this understand how important it is to people like us, especially when you can't pick up the pieces. You know, it really sucks. So I just want to thank you guys for giving me this opportunity to share my story, and I really hope we get the outcome we really need. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bob. I'd like to, first of all, thank Governor Baker, Lieutenant Governor Polito, Judy, in your office. You know, my story, unfortunately, isn't very uncommon. As a child, 11 years old, I was raped by the Commonwealth is very familiar with the person who raped me. His name was Wayne Chapman, recently passed away. Can't say that I'm going to miss that person. You know, he was also I don't like to forget this, but he was a suspect in the disappearance of Andy Puglisi. In knowing that, I think about how fortunate I am to still be here. That when you're in the grasp of a child predator, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you're going to make it home alive that day. And fortunately for me, I did. So I'm going to try not to get off into the weeds. I make little notes, but I'm not a writer. I'm not a very eloquent speaker. I try to speak from the heart, and I try not to let my emotions take over because I could be very angry at this moment. I lived a lot. Anger came into my life very, very early on when I should have been a happy-go-lucky child I was filled with fear, anger, disgust, horrible feelings that a child at 11 years old should not be feeling. I should be out playing with my friends, having a good time. So from that day on, my life changed. I was issued a life sentence that day. A life of pain, fear, struggle. I had things that I had to struggle with in life, and that certainly didn't help. I'm very fortunate. I've got a good life today, so I don't want to bring everybody down, think I have this awful life. I've been given a gift. I look at it that way. And often I thought of, why wasn't I murdered that day? What is my purpose? Because I do believe we all have a purpose in life. And I think thanks to your office and Judy and other people who have reached out to me over the years, that I can take that horrible situation and turn it into a positive. This bill is very important to me, of course. But more than that, it's more important to the people that may be victimized in the future. Other children that may be raped, other women that may be assaulted by their spouses, strangers, whatever. And it pains me to think that this is just going to go back to study. And in my head, that means they're going to kill it. That's just my head. But my mother didn't raise a coward. She raised a fighter. I could have cowered that day and not shown up at court. I don't know how many days I had to sit in the back of a police car, pulling over to the side of the road, and I'm out with my friends and having to look at pictures over and over again and having to relive that day over and over again. And then having to make up stories about why I was sitting in the back of a cruiser to my friends wasn't easy. But we got through that hard time, and I was able to go to court and face my accuser. And he was sent to prison, and not knowing if he's ever going to get out again. I spent many years looking over my shoulder. I remember being afraid to walk 2 blocks from my friend's house back home at night. That's not normal behavior for a child. It was only 2 blocks. I remember my friend being mad one day. His mother made him walk me home. Imagine having to be walked home. And that was tough. But, I grew up, we all get older, and things change. And finally, I was able to get on and have a good life. I've got a beautiful family at home, a wife and child. And thank you, God, nothing has ever happened to them. But that was always in the back of my head. Whenever my child would go somewhere to be a friend's house, there was always that knot in my stomach, not knowing if they were safe or not. And like I said, it's a life sentence. It's always something in the back of my head. Even today, even though that Chapman has passed on, it's always there. We are dealt a life sentence. So to me, it just doesn't make sense that somebody should be able to be out on bail and able to offend again, whether it be new victims or the same victim over and over again. It defies common sense. Like I say, I'm not the sharpest guy out there, but common sense tells me that you keep these people away from people. And the evidence shows that child predators repeat, and repeat, and repeat, and repeat. Wayne Chapman confessed to molesting over 100 children in Massachusetts, in other counties. I don't know how many just here alone, but he traveled around. He wasn't just from this area. So nobody knows how many. That's horrifying, horrifying. So to me, it's just like playing Russian roulette with the safety of our children, our most precious commodity, we're told. So I don't understand. I don't know, you said earlier, maybe I haven't done enough due diligence on my part to help pass this bill. I know I wasn't able to meet one-on-one with the senators and reps, unfortunately. I have a job that requires a lot of time on my part, and they graciously accepted to give me the day off today to be here, and I'm grateful. I've never been to the State House. What a wonderful, wondrous building. What an amazing building. and amazing things can get done. And that's why I'm here today, because I don't believe down inside that this bill is dead. I think there's still hope. And that's how I try to live my life. A little bit of hope today that tomorrow's going to be a better day, and hopefully that we can do a better job of protecting our most vulnerable citizens. And thank you again, Governor, Lieutenant Governor Judy. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tara. Thank you for having me here today. I'm not going to lie, I struggled to get here. And with my words,
Tara, can you
Just
pull the
trying to-
mic up just a little
Want
more?
to hear you.
yeah, just to comprehend and trying to wrap my head around everything that's happened. I play it over in my mind. What sane human beings want to see people beaten, raped, sexually molested, and let these violent offenders roam free? I don't understand it. I don't. I continue to share my story if I can help one victim. These are uncomfortable conversations that need to be had. These are ugly, scary nightmares that happen to be our lives that we live through and survive, but they need to be heard. When doing so, it causes us so much pain. We're triggered into PTSD, reliving these horrible events. While most of us are in therapy, we're trying to forget, or at least trying to find a way to handle our responses when we have these nightmares. Although I can't speak for other survivors, I'm sure they would agree that it takes a lot out of us, but we get up here and we tell our story to help other victims and survivors and future victims, and to help legislators understand how crucial it is to pass this bill for 4290. To give victims a chance to stay alive after suffering a violent attack or violent abuse at the hands of a dangerous human being, to give victims a chance to get to a safe location and get their families to a safe location. This bill wasn't something permanent. It's not to lock someone up forever. It was a basic ask. It was a temporary hold. I don't understand why that was so difficult. The dangerous violent offender under the current law has more rights and freedom, and usually they're let right back out to go and do it again. The dangerous person's allowed to cut off their GPS bracelet with little to no repercussions. The dangerous violent person's allowed to go violate a restraining order, not just once, but 3, 5, 8, 10 times, which I've seen many times. With the majority of them, they've renamed the restraining order. It's just a piece of paper. And it kind of is. There's no value to it. Because under the current law, there's little to no consequence. It's just a misdemeanor. The dangerous person's allowed to go right back to the victim and give them a beating of their life, because they will know walking into court is like their first offense, just like my abuser did. He walked in with a smile and would laugh and say, "I'll just be sentenced to 90 or 60 days. And he would laugh and look at it like summer camp. I was also told by the DA, this is back in 2017 for my case, which he had a long violent criminal history dating back to 1988. He had over 88 charges of assault and battery with dangerous weapons. And his previous record could not be used because I was told it was prejudicial, and sorry, that's the law. And he knew that. A child molester or a child rapist should not be allowed to post bail while awaiting trial. This just doesn't make sense. I'm at a loss for words. While my abuser knows the justice system and he laughs at the system, and he knows it and he uses it to work in his favor every time. He reads case law and he knows it like the back of his hand. He's the one that taught me all about case law. And that's why I'm here today supporting this bill and many others currently. He knows how to use it, and he continued to repeatedly abuse victims because he knows the Commonwealth allows him to do so over and over again and again. He laughs and he smiles when he's in court, and he knows and tells me he'll just take the slap on the wrist that he's always used to getting. Change needs to happen. It just makes no sense. When will our legislators see that we are using our voices to protect the people of Massachusetts? I'm not using my voice anymore really to protect myself. I've already been there. My damage is done, and now I'm just trying to heal from it. It's not about me anymore. We are using our voice to protect their families, their spouses, their children, parents, and other family members, their brothers and sisters, cousins, friends, neighbors, and anyone that they care about. We're speaking to protect them. No one is safe or invincible of possibly becoming a victim of a violent crime, being attacked or abused. If you're a living, breathing human, you're at risk of suffering a violent crime or abuse just like the rest of us. The biggest mistake in life is thinking it can never happen to you or your families. It's just time for our government to do what's right. It's time to protect the victims and future victims. Just like one survivor had previously stated, it's a basic human right to feel safe. These are basic asks. Just to simply be able to get your family safe, you safe, have a GPS be a felony, and a restraining order actually have some value to that piece of paper. These dangerous, violent offenders need to know if they are going to attack and abuse someone, they're going to be held, and there's going to be consequences. I plead with all of you to make these changes, take the control away from these abusers, and stop them from laughing at our justice system, and allowing them the right to reoffend and to continue using the system in their favor. It makes no sense. What's a human life worth? What's your own life worth? To be able to grant basic human rights, to feel safe, and not to be able to have that right to grant basic human rights to feel safe, and to not do it is just disgusting and sickening to me. In my opinion, you're either an abuser yourself or you know ones that you're protecting. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess I'm the last one, so I'll go next. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I really appreciate given this opportunity, and also want to thank all my fellow survivors for being here with me. I'm really proud to have you all by my side. My story is that I was raped by a serial rapist who was a stranger to me one summer on Cape Cod more than 30 years ago. My assaulter had committed the same crime almost a year early and was out on bail awaiting his trial, and during that time was given the opportunity to attack and rape at least 8 other women that we're aware of. When I learned at that time that he had already been arrested for another rape so long ago, I was shocked that the system in Massachusetts did not protect me and allowed this to happen. What happened next is a long story, but in short, after learning that he was continuing to rape other women over and over, I began to work closely with the police until together we found him. For the next 30 years, I lived in fear of this man and spent a great deal of time in therapy trying to recover from the post-traumatic stress that resulted from my rape. I eventually managed to pull my life together and move on, but this was only due to the incredible support I had from my family and friends. For a long time, I did my best not to think about this tragic event that changed my life. It was just too painful and would lead to a spike in my fear and anxiety that this man or some other stranger would harm me or my family. I always said, though, that at some point I wanted to be able to help victims of violent crimes. So earlier this year, when I was asked to participate in a roundtable related to dangerousness legislation, and then looked over the bill and learned that 30 years later, victims still are not being protected, I was horrified and decided I wanted to do what I could to help advocate for the legislation. Since then, in addition to participating in that first roundtable back in December, I testified at a hearing, and I've also asked many family and friends to submit emails, and have submitted emails myself to the Judiciary Committee requesting the passage of the bill, and have also pushed this out on social media to get support. I met with the Women's Caucus and members of the Black and Latino Caucus and spent 2 full days at the State House with other survivors, meeting with senators and representatives to tell them my story in an effort to help them understand why it's so important to put more protection in place for victims. During these meetings, it was clear that almost all the individuals we met with were in support of the legislation, and a few of them even cried when they were listening to us tell our stories. So imagine how surprised I was when, after all this effort, I learned that apparently my life and other innocent victims' lives are less important to the Judiciary Committee than a dangerous person's life is. The fact that this legislation was sent to study is a slap in the face to me and all of the many victims of domestic violence, rape, and child abuse in Massachusetts. I am honestly angry and embarrassed to live in one of the states in America that cares the least about victims. As a survivor who after 30 years is no longer afraid of my abuser because he's dead, I know it's important to me to help other victims who do not have the support or resources I have to speak up for myself. And I'll do whatever I need to do to make sure that many of the protections, including in this Dangerousness bill, are put in place. And thank you again.
Good afternoon. My name is Allison Sullivan. I'm a state representative, but I'm also a survivor of domestic violence. I want to thank the both of you from the bottom of my heart. 4 years ago, I testified in front of the Judiciary Committee that I serve on, hoping that the stories that I was sharing along with survivors next to me would make movements. Sadly, in that legislative session, it got cut short because of COVID. But the both of you were determined to make a difference here in the Commonwealth, to really protect victims from dangerous individuals, really dangerous individuals. You said you were not going to sit silently by. So in December, you had a roundtable event in Plymouth, where I was able to join multiple women who came forward and shared their heartbreaking stories. And you said that day forward, you were going to bring voices to those who have felt for so long that their voices didn't matter and their voices couldn't be heard. Back in 2018, when I decided to run for office, I knew I was putting myself in risk and danger, because my abuser, who I have a lifetime restraining order against, said to me, if I ever tried to leave, he would kill me. Over 10 years later, I still believe those words. I remember talking with my mom before the judiciary hearing that we had this year regarding this legislation. My abuser was held on a dangerousness hearing, so he was being held for 80 days. My mom and dad said there was a race against the clock, because they knew if he was let out after that 80-day, I would not be sitting in front of you today. I'm alive. I have my voice. But there are so many others that are no longer with us, that no longer have a voice. Their lives did matter, and they do matter. And I am heartbroken to see that the judiciary sent this bill to a study after all the effort of all of you so bravely coming forward. It is not easy telling our stories. It's not easy hearing others tell their story that sounds so similar to yours. It's reliving trauma and hell that we have lived through. But it's because of all of you that so many were willing to vote in favor of this legislation. My hope is that it's not over yet, and we can get something through. If not, I know with the help of my colleagues sitting here today, the fight is not over. But thank you to the both of you.
Thank you. What, any legislators? Bruce, do you want to say something? Sure.
So for those of you that don't know me, I'm State Senator Bruce Tarr, and I'm the minority leader of the Massachusetts State Senate. And I'm very pleased to have my colleague, Senator Patrick O'Connor, with us here today. And if there's one sentence I want to utter to all of you, it's this: the fight is not over. Will not be over today, will not be over tomorrow. It will not be over until legislation is signed into law in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that corrects this dysfunction, this structural dysfunction in our criminal justice system. It's unfortunate that all of you have had to experience what you've had to, because that dysfunction has existed for far too long. But now it's time to change. In your bravery, in your courage, in your willingness to relive what you have been through again and again, to share it with all of us, all of our colleagues in the legislature, that is the fuel that will drive this change. Rest assured, we know it's a hardship, we know it's difficult, and we know that every time you come to these microphones, it is not easy to do. But we want you to know that your efforts are not in vain, and they're not lost, and they will not be in the rearview mirror until we get to a better place than we're at today. It's unfortunate that we've suffered a setback as a result of what's happened with the Judiciary Committee. But in this democracy and in this legislature, ultimately, it is not one committee that governs what happens. Like my colleagues that are at this table, I'm incredibly frustrated by this bill being put into a study, particularly because this committee came to the Senate and to the House and repeatedly asked for this bill to be extended so there could be more time for consideration. And that time was granted with an expectation that there would be something that we could act upon. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. But we are not without options. We have precious little time left in this legislative session, and we will look for every single opportunity to raise this issue and work toward a resolution. I don't have a crystal ball. Nobody at this table does. The only thing that we can control is what we do and how steadfast we are in doing it. The legislators at this table will be steadfast, will be unyielding, and we won't be alone. We won't be alone because there are other colleagues that support this effort. And we won't be alone because of all of the folks that know you, that know your story, that care about you, and that care about a just system to protect our society. You've helped to galvanize a movement, and that movement, it's not over. We don't know what the future holds, but we do know what we'll do. We as legislators have many priorities. We have to. It's our responsibility. But there is no greater priority than the public safety of the people of this Commonwealth. And if we trust the judiciary, and if we trust the people that are appointed to the bench to serve, then we must give them the power and the authority to do what it takes to maintain public safety. I want to say thank you to the governor and lieutenant governor for keeping their commitment, for their leadership, for their steadfast support, for getting us together here today, even as we have suffered a setback, to remind us that there is more to this story. I'll end where I began. It is not over. Thank you.
Oh, Senator.
I'm just going to be very brief. First off, I just wanted to thank all the survivors who are here for your courage, your bravery, your advocacy. Knowing a few of you and having been able to work with a few of you over the past few years, I know how much this issue and this setback hurts. And as the minority leader said, and as the governor, lieutenant governor has identified, this is far from over. And when you look at the actual policy that's offered up to be changed, not only is it a no-brainer in my opinion, but it's not a heavy ask. And if you go out to the people of Massachusetts, as you have, and you continue to make this case, that these are closing loopholes in our judicial system, and this isn't going to further impact criminal justice as a whole, except make it better for people who are victims, for women, for children. This, in my opinion, is one of the most sensible pieces of legislation that this state could pass. And as a member of the Judiciary Committee, I was proud to not support the recommendation to send this to study. This is something that we absolutely have to get done, and should have been done a long time ago. And with case precedent out there, what happened in 2020 with an individual who is alleged of a rape being out on cash bail, the proof's there. We need to do this now. And if you ask somebody if a person who gets cash bail, if they should be immediately no longer eligible for dangerousness hearing after we determine that they're dangerous, people on the street would say, no, that's illogical. If you say, all right, well, after the first hearing, can we no longer go after that person for dangerousness? They would say, no, that's illogical. We're trying to fix the illogical elements of our judicial system to make it work for survivors, for victims, for people to come forward, and especially for children and for women. So I just wanted to thank the governor, lieutenant governor, Representative Sullivan, for your continued steadfast support of this piece of legislation. And my hope is that we can get this done and that we can continue to put advocacy and pressure on individual members of the legislature and to say, you know, it's a shame that we weren't able to get this done last session. It's even worse that we weren't able to get it done this one. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator Tarr. Thank you, Senator O'Connor. Thank you, Representative Muratori, for being here, for your friend and colleague, Representative Sullivan. Thank you, Governor, for your incredible leadership and commitment to the people of this Commonwealth. It has been the honor of a lifetime to serve in various positions in government. I served in the legislature for 10 years and got to know my colleagues here and others. In that time period, I was part of a community of people in the survivor community that advanced a version of Jessica's Law, which was signed by Governor Patrick 14 years ago yesterday. This was a bill to address some deficiencies in Massachusetts, where Massachusetts has one of the weakest set of laws relative to protecting kids from dangerous sex offenders. Ultimately, it took 3 years to get a version of Jessica's Law passed in Massachusetts, and we were able to obtain a 10-year mandatory minimum for rape of a child. And before that law was signed, there was no minimum. It could have been any term of years to punish someone for doing that to a child in our Commonwealth. One of the parts of the joy of these jobs is getting things done and accomplishing what we set out to do and making good on the promises that we've made to the people of this Commonwealth. An equal joy has been meeting and getting to know the people of this Commonwealth. And being with you today and over the past 5 months has been one of the greatest honors. I want to thank you. You are extraordinary people. You are good people. And for you to come over and over again to public meetings, to one-on-one meetings, to not only try to heal as a person from the tragedy that happened to you, but to come here repeatedly because of the pain that that caused you and the trajectory of your life requires you to be part of this process so that some other fellow human being or child of this Commonwealth doesn't have to experience the tragedy, the pain, the everyday darkness that is part of your life forever is an incredible and extraordinary and beautiful and loving gift. And I'm so grateful that I've had the opportunity to come to know you. I also know that this work is not done, but that you have made the case that there is a solve, there is a fix, it's rational, it's backed by a lot of thoughtfulness and common sense. All it requires are the people who hold these public positions, who are voted into office, to consider the possibilities, to also have the courage to do their jobs. And so I would just want to thank you for being part of this very emotional and very important process to make our Commonwealth a better place for everyone.
It's hard to know what to say when the Lieutenant Governor pretty much said it all. I just want to echo the gratitude that she expressed on behalf of our administration and on behalf of those who aren't here to tell their stories and who have always worried when they opened a door, when they got in their car, when they went for a walk, about what might happen next. We talk a lot about why this legislation is important for those who have the courage to come forward. The thing I keep wondering about is how many people don't come forward because we don't have these protections in place. How many people suffer in silence? How many people choose to run, who knows where, because they're afraid the Commonwealth won't be on their side, because we haven't been on the side of others who have chosen to come forward. Sexual assault on a child, child trafficking, child pornography. Honestly, this isn't brain surgery. GPS bracelets, restraining orders, acts of violence committed after an arraignment. Again, this isn't complicated. We're going to continue to fight for this as long as we possibly can. And believe me, you and others like you who have had the guts and the courage to come forward and speak your piece will be ringing in our ears until we get this done. And I thank you again for being with us today. And I thank all those who support those who go through the traumatic experiences that we have heard time and time again at these hearings and these roundtables, because you are doing God's work on behalf of some of the very best of God's children. And to our colleagues in the legislature, I know several people who voted no today, Democrats and Republicans. Good for them. Thanks very much. Really appreciate your presence.
At this point, we'll have the governor and lieutenant governor come to the podium for questions. Everyone else can stay here for now. Cameras switch.
I think I'm waiting for a couple of my colleagues here. Okay. Well, there are a number of pieces of legislation, obviously, that'll move between now and the end of the session. And we're going to do the best we can to make sure that lawmakers get another look at this at some point during the process. Well, like I said, this isn't over yet, and we'll see what happens between now and the end of the session. But I must say, and I said this when we had our hearing down in Plymouth, which was one of the earlier roundtables we'd had in this legislative session, that when I listened to the folks who spoke there, I never felt so incompetent in doing my job on behalf of people who desperately needed our help, and I'm really hoping we can find a way to get some of this accomplished. Say again? Yeah. You know, I've never played that way, and I really don't believe that at the end of the day, you get the very best of what we're supposed to get out of this process by acting in anger or frustration. My hope is that we'll find another way to get it done. That is a blatant misrepresentation of both fact and process. That is a blatant misrepresentation, period. It's not true. Say again? We've had many, many conversations at the staff level, at the leadership level, and between and among a variety of representatives of our administration and legislative committee members about this issue for months. We have. In fact, I got a bunch of text messages this morning from a number of legislators about this particular issue and the vote that was taken today. You know, I hate to get into the details of this stuff when the process is still going forward, and what I can tell you is there are many people in the legislature, many, who like many of the elements of this bill. Do they like all of them? No, but I never expected that they would. Was there what I would describe as a common ground area there that people could have rallied around or could rally around between now and the end of the session? Absolutely. And I hope they do. And they know exactly where we're coming from on this stuff, believe me. I don't think so. I mean, that would be a good question to ask our friends here. I think for the most part, first of all, it takes a lot of guts to come up to the building and show your physical presence and tell your story, when for many of them, this is not over. I mean, several of the folks who've spoken in a number of these events, this is real-time current events issue for them. You know, they are spending time looking over their shoulder, parking in front of the security cameras, doing a whole bunch of things, not going out by themselves ever anywhere, living in many respects in fear. And a number of those folks did come up to this State House, did talk to their reps and senators. Some of them talked to them in their district. Some of them came up and talked to committee members. They've been very active and very brave in doing so. And I don't think anybody has been unwilling to meet with or talk to them. That hasn't been an issue. Sure, that one passed the House and it's currently pending in the Senate, and I sure hope that one makes it through by the end of this. Look, 48 states think revenge porn is a crime. It's us in South Carolina. We should really be able to get that one done too. Yeah. We've had conversations with folks in the legislature about this issue too, and we issued an executive order to cover some of the issues that were associated with our concerns about people's ability to access reproductive health services and abortion, not just in Massachusetts, but in other states. I think I know how important this is to the House and to the Senate and to the Senate President and to the Speaker. It's my hope that we also know there's something coming out today. It's my hope that this can be something we can support, because obviously this is important to many people here in Massachusetts. And by the way, it won't be important just to people in Massachusetts. It'll be important to people in a lot of parts of the country. You know, I really don't want to comment on that until I see what it is we're going to get, because obviously on this one, words really, on all of them, words matter. On this one, they really matter. Thanks, everybody. Again, thank you for being here, and thank you very much to our friends who came out to talk today. We can't tell you how much we appreciate your courage and your testimony. Thank you.